And a suicide attempt with a gun is always a suicide. There's rarely any walking away from that. So there are as many reasons for people, for gay people and lesbian and bisexual and transgender and queer and questioning people to be concerned about gun violence as there are people. There are 300 million guns in this country. That's almost one for every citizen. And it's unnecessary. It's a public health crisis. And here's another thing I think that's important to note. This is not, and it has never been, about the Second Amendment. It is no more about the Second Amendment than gay marriage was about the Bible. It's old wine and a new bottle. We've heard it all before. This is about power. It's about political manipulation. And it's about profit.
I noticed in a lot of your protests, there are people who are standing veiled in white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that part of the protest and who they represent.
The people that you're referring to, we call them the human beings. The human beings. And they represent, each of them, a specific person who died of gun violence. We print out placards, and we have a picture of that person and of their story, their bio. And when we participate, we are silent and we are veiled and we're dressed in white to stand and to represent those people. Inevitably, they give people pause. There's usually an emotional reaction, even in the most kind of oppositional experience, in that people recognize the loss. Just so you know, that they're the brainchild of a performance artist in New York, Tigger Ferguson, who developed them for the Gay Pride March that we had immediately after the massacre at Pulse. And it was a breathtaking moment, and they have been part of every one of our demonstrations since, in volumes of 1 or 2, all the way up to 60 or 70. One of the most beautiful photos I've seen was of when we marched in the March for Our Lives, when there were so many, and there was an aerial view from above where it was the New York Times photographer, and this whole kind of mass of white bodies in a crowd just gave you an indication of how much potential has been lost. How many people have died, and this is just a segment of a segment of a segment. There's that, I don't know who said this, I think it might have been Joseph Stalin. One death is a tragedy. 1 million is a statistic. And one of the things that we try to do, and I think one of the things that the human beings do that is so magnificent and heartbreaking at the same time, is it calls attention to those lives in a visible and tangible and honorable and dignified way. So that's who they are. That's kind of what they do.
What has the reception of your group been, both within the LGBTQ community and in the larger community, and with the politicians that you've been talking to and things like that?
In the LGBTQ community, I think it's fair to say that we've been kind of overwhelmingly are approved of, right? The people are happy to participate. They're happy that we exist. They understand the issues. Many of them are survivors, or, we get a lot of support and appreciation from our own community. And there's always room for more. So if there's any LGBTQ people listening, I would encourage you to seek out chapters in your area, or, send us an email at info@gaysagainstguns.net, or go on our site and reach out to us. But, with politicians, it's been kind of a mixed bag. I think over time, they've gotten to know that we are serious about what we're doing. We're not flaky. We are fabulous with a purpose. Okay? We are here to change things. over time, they've gotten to appreciate the fact that we do this and that we show up and that we try to keep the heat on. And Carolyn Maloney, for example, who's a representative from New York City, has invited us to many of her press conferences. She herself got into politics after her husband was killed on the Long Island Railroad some years ago in a mass shooting. But, there are others that have been okay. But as you know, any Republican or even some Democrat from a red state or a red district is not going to react kindly when we call them on the carpet for their collusion, really, in the slaughter of American citizens. So the problem is that they may not necessarily or initially take us seriously, but then they find out that we stick around. And I hope they continue to fear us. More importantly, I hope they listen to us. And I hope to God they change things.
So what are some of the events and things that you have planned? We're at the beginning of Pride Month, so I know there's a lot of Pride activities, and we're also coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the Pulse shooting. So are there events that you have planned in New York and elsewhere?
We've got a lot of stuff planned in New York. I cannot speak for other chapters around the country. We've started to kind of coordinate recently. So we have chapters in Orlando and in Washington, D.C. and New Jersey and Ohio and L.A. and San Francisco, and we have them cropping up all the time. So there are things that are happening around the country that I may not be 100% aware of. We are going to have there's an event that's happening which is called Twisted Tuesday, and that's on June 12th. And that's going to be at Henrietta Hudson Bar in New York City. And Twisted Tuesday, this is the second year. This is the second anniversary of the Pulse shooting. And Twisted Tuesday was an event, a night that they had at Pulse, and that we are honoring with an event at Henrietta Hudson's in New York City. That's on June 12th. We're going to be up at Fairfield County's Pride Rally on June 9th. We just did a march across Brooklyn Bridge today, and we had our Sashay Away runway, which is kind of a brainchild of Mary Gustafson and others who are part of Gays Against Guns. We're hoping to have a very large contingent of human beings for this year's Gay Pride March. And we're going to do a gun show on June 16th from New York to a gun show, which I cannot tell you. Just a side note, we try to keep the gun show location that we're going to go to kind of quiet, because we found out that when we announced it, they kind of expected us. So we've kind of tried to give a little element of surprise. That's another story, but those are some of the events that are coming up. So June 16th is the gun show visit. June 12th is the Twisted Tuesday event. We have the Fairfield Pride Rally. We have the Pride March in New York City. And these are in addition to other kind of direct action or civil disobedience things that are kind of brewing. Just, for everything like the planning that's required for things like the 26-hour vigil and demonstration outside of FedEx, or for the Bloody Valentine and Tuesday, there's a lot of advanced planning, and there are always about 6 or 7 irons in the fire, if you will, of events that we have planned, some of which come to fruition immediately and some of which take a little bit more planning. But we take great care in doing all these things. What I've read you may not be the full list, and there may be something tomorrow or 2 days from now that I haven't mentioned.
Lou, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that people are thinking about, or anything you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, there is. There are as many approaches and views and feelings about the causes and the impacts of gun violence as there are people involved in the gun violence prevention movement. Everybody's touched personally by this. I've tried to explain to you some of my outrage, and this is my personal outrage. The frustration that we've seen all of this before. And as a gay man who kind of became aware of life during the AIDS crisis, and who witnessed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, who witnessed and participated in the battle for marriage equality. It's the first time in my life, I think, that I felt as fully American as ever. And suddenly I'm seeing the same crass and vulgar tactics that were used to oppress gay people and to facilitate their death. I watched that happen, and I see it happening again across the board now. Not just in schools, by the way. There's a mass shooting every day in this country. If you think a mass shooting is 3 or more people or 4 or more people killed or injured. It's not just schools. And they want you to think that. They want you to think it's a school problem. It's a gun problem. But the point that I'm making is this. These things we're seeing, the slaughter of 30,000, 38,000 people a year, and that's just deaths. There's another 70,000 injuries and countless people who had to witness this slaughter. Think about the psychic damage. All of this is happening. It's a symptom of a brutal sickness in this country, of a crassness and a vulgar pursuit of power that is slaughtering American citizens. It is treasonous. And we have to stop allowing ourselves to be manipulated by fear and hate, or we are dying, and it has to stop. I guess that's what I have to say.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for all the work that your group is doing. I think this has been a really tough issue for everyone. You're right, it touches everybody, every American. And, I think the more people who are talking up, who are acting up, who are trying to disrupt this cycle, and the more different ways that we're doing that, I think the better. So I'm so glad that your group is doing what you're doing and that it's been so well received in your community. And I know that recently a Chicago chapter, I'm in Chicago, and a Chicago chapter started up. So it's just so great to hear about.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. And we will put links to your website and your social media up on our website as well.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much.
All right. Thanks, Lou. Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Imunari, and we're using it with express permission of the band. Our logo and all original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and is done expressly for Two Broads Talking Politics. We can be found on our website at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com. You can reach us by email at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com, on Twitter at twobroadstalk, on Facebook and Instagram, and you can support us on patreon.com. You can find our podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and anywhere podcasts are found. If you are interested in advertising on Two Broads Talking Politics, please email us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com.